Good day, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you today at the ESC TV series. Here in Barcelona 2022, we have the privilege of learning about new clinical trials. I'm Rhian Touyz. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at the McGill University Health Centre in Montreal and a visiting professor at the University of Glasgow. And I'm absolutely delighted to meet today with Tom, who is the lead investigator of the TIME study. Tom, thank you for joining us and for sharing with us at this meeting the results of this very interesting study that looks at the effects of evening and morning and dosing with respect to cardiovascular events, hugely important in the hypertension community. So welcome, Tom.
Yeah.
And perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and about the trial.
Well, I'm Tom MacDonald. I'm a physician and professor at the University of Dundee. And this trial was funded by the British Heart Foundation, but we also got some help from the British and Irish Hypertension Society and the National Institute for Health Research Networks. So TIME was a trial, as you say, comparing dosing of hypertensive medication prescribed in usual care. And we recruited 21,104 people from the free-range general practice population mainly, and randomized them to take their medication in the evening or the morning. And we followed them up for quite a long time. The median was 5.2 years, which means half of them were in it for longer than that. And the longest was 9.3 years. So in fact, I started this trial nearly 12 years ago. So we followed them all up and asked them what happened to them and their relatives and their doctors and their nurses. We got information on their outcome from all those sources, but we also crucially used record linkage. What many people may not be aware of is that the UK has very good records of hospitalizations and deaths. In fact, complete records. And so with the patient's consent, we were able to retrieve all that data from the NHS computer databases. And once we had those, we then adjudicated them. There's a lot of work for the adjudication committee. They adjudicated them, and we eventually managed to adjudicate them all. And we ended up with enough events to determine whether there was any difference between morning and evening dose. And what we found, was no difference at all.
No difference?
Not even a smidge of difference.
So evening or daytime dosing of antihypertensive therapy, I guess once a day, a medication,
Once a day,
is that
yeah,
correct?
That's correct, yes.
There was no difference, in cardiovascular events.
That's right.
Whether medication was in the morning or the evening.
Correct.
So, Tom, that is a little bit different to what many of the other larger studies, particularly the big Spanish study that we're familiar with, where they found that patients who were taking their dosage in the evening, their cardiovascular event rate was lower. How do you explain your, I guess, unexpected results? Because I think you hypothesized originally that you would find a difference.
Yes, we set out to, I mean, if you took your tablets in the evening and you got a vascular benefit, that's the most cost-effective intervention ever. It didn't really cost anything to do that, and you get the benefit. So that's what we set out to do, and we didn't find any difference whatsoever. And I think it's a big mystery. I think we did the trial in the best way we could. I think our data would stand any scrutiny. So I don't understand it, and I think more work needs to be done to try and work out why it's different. And, you know, the UK has got a reasonably high incidence of cardiovascular disease. I live in Scotland, which is the highest in the UK, and Spain's supposed to have a low cardiovascular event rate, but we had a 0.7% adjudicated event rate, and we had to double the sample size, and we had to extend the trial twice to get enough events. maybe there's something in the adjudication process or whatever, but when we did all of this, the best way possible, we found no difference.
And Tom, I mean, probably the most important criterion with all of this really was making sure that those patients who were assigned to take their medication in the morning and those who were assigned to take the medication in the evening were truly compliant or adherent in terms of those instructions. Do you have any concern that maybe patients weren't that adherent to the instructions?
So the vast majority were. We know that some people reported that they weren't adherent and then reported they were adherent and then reported they weren't adherent and then reported they were adherent. I think the mean time to reporting non-adherence was something like 1.6 years. So most of the people for quite a lot of the trial were adherent. And at the end of the trial, there was not so many non-adherent people as there were at other times. I think the problem is that when the newspapers say take your tablets at night, people jump ship. And then when our independent data monitoring committee then said we don't see any issue, they jump ship back. So at the end of the trial, I think 7.5% in the morning and 21% in the evening said they were non-compliant. I think for the majority of the time, most people were non-compliant, were compliant. And the problem is that other trials of cardiovascular medication has lots of non-compliant people in it. The definition of compliance is taking 80% of your tablets. Wow!
But I mean the compliance in terms of nighttime versus daytime.
I understand, but there was patient-reported compliance in the study. For a study of this duration, I think that people were pretty adherent. And I think that we should have seen something with such a large trial for such a long period of time if nighttime dosing was benefit. But we couldn't see anything at all. So I don't know why, I don't think adherence explains anything.
So, as you say, the mystery as to why there was no difference, do you have any thoughts as to what may be explaining
It's
this?
difficult to speculate. You know, I'm prepared to say that my trial is robust, that our findings are, in my view, definitive, and that we'd be happy if anybody wanted to audit our system. And I think I don't want to make any criticisms against other trials because I don't know all their details and data. So I think that's where we are. I think we are produced a result which will stand any scrutiny.
So in terms of what we can inform the community, do you think the message is that at least in the cohort of patients that you studied, which would be the individuals in the UK, attending their family physicians or GP practices, the message would be it doesn't matter if you take your tablets in the morning or the evening?
It doesn't matter from a cardiovascular perspective. I think some people might prefer to take the tablets in the evening or the morning for other reasons. And that's fine. They can do that now. They're not forgoing any benefit by taking the tablets in the morning. As far as, you know, from our study, it doesn't matter. You know, we had a small difference in falls in our study between morning and evening, but more falls occurred in morning dose. So, you know, that might be if you feel a bit dizzy during the day, maybe taking them at night is okay. We were worried that perhaps people would get up in the middle of the night and fall over, but it didn't materialize. And so I think that there might be other reasons why people want to take their tablets in the morning or the evening, but from a cardiovascular perspective, it doesn't matter a jot.
And Tom, this was a large study.
Yeah.
This is really impressive, the number of patients that you managed to enroll in this study. How did you manage in a relatively short period of time to get such an outstanding involvement of commitment by patients to the study?
Quite interesting, because in the pilot study, we did lots of testing to find out what the best way would be. In fact, the cheapest way was through biobank, but they're probably very low-risk people. The most effective way was using the NIHR networks and writing to, wait for it, nearly 600,000 patients.
Oh my.
Sending about 52,000 emails, something like that. So, and that turned into 21,104. Some of the colleagues in clinics recruited as well. It wasn't, and we had a poster campaign. There was a whole series of things you can read about in Trials, because it's published how we did it, with all the cost effectiveness of each method. I think these decentralized trials, doing it this way with no bottlenecks, because 300, 400 people could recruit in one day, and there was no bottleneck to that. Often in trials there's bottlenecks such as you have to take a blood, or you have to do this, and we don't have any of those in the decentralized trials. And that is the way people are going to do trials in the future, because the cost per patient is a lot cheaper than some of the pharmaceutical company trials I've been involved with. I don't know how they afford it.
Sure. So before we end off this very interesting discussion, we do have a few minutes for the audience to ask questions, and I'm just wondering if we have any questions from the audience before the session finishes.
Oh, there's one over there.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Thanks very much. It was a great trial. Really enjoyed your presentation. I thought I saw a little bit of an effect with diabetes. Is it done and dusted with diabetics?
So we had about 3,000 diabetics in the study, more than we would expected. So they were a bit over-recruited. But if you follow 3,000 diabetics for 5.2 years and you're randomizing the morning and evening and there was no difference between the two groups, the point estimates were in slight side of each other, but they were completely insignificant. I mean, that's a big trial of diabetics. And we saw no difference, really, statistically. You know, how many people would you need to study to look at smaller effect sizes? The population of Scotland? Something like that. I mean, you have to recruit huge numbers of people to enable you to look at the difference in outcomes, and the outcomes then take you 6 years to discover. So I think that for practical purposes, I don't think anybody else is going to do another study like this.
Tom, if there are no further questions from the audience, oh, we do have a question, please, yes.
Oh, here we go.
And here's another question.
Do you know any idea about when the paper will come out?
So what happened with our trial is that the lovely NHS Digital, have you ever heard of them? Were 8 months late in giving us the final record linkage. So it was due in June, it arrived in February. We locked the database at the end of July. That was not very long ago. So we've been struggling to get the paper finalized. It's currently being reviewed by the authors. We hope to submit it next week to the Lancet. But we're in the lap of the gods. It would have been preferable to have it in before this conference, but we were kiboshed by NHS Digital, who I don't understand why they're so bureaucratic and difficult, but there we go.
We have time for one final question, so please, yeah.
Congratulations. My question is, why didn't you present a sex-specific analysis?
Why didn't I?
Present a sex-specific analysis.
Sex,
you know, women and men.
I could do. We haven't done all the analysis of everything yet. I had to get the principal results out for here. I don't think there's any difference between sexes, but I'll look into it for you. I think it's unlikely to be different, to be honest.
Okay, Tom, again, thank you so much for sharing with us this really interesting study, and I know we certainly look forward to seeing it coming out in publication soon, so thank you very much.
And thank you for interviewing me.
Thank you.